2, 1. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our fall virtual town hall. We look forward to having these and answering questions from our residents. Today, we have with us today City Manager Dave Rudat. We also have with us our Emergency Manager Andrew Stevens. And also from Public Works, we have Jeff Ellicus. Police Chief Dan Pingrey was going to be with us today, but he is under the weather, unable to be here. But he did go through the questions submitted by residents and provided some responses. And also City Manager Dave Rudat is going to be able to speak to some of those questions that were directed towards our Chief of Police. Okay, let's get started with what we all just experienced this week. Andrew was our first storm of the season. The first one's always a big one, right? The first question we have is from a resident wanting to know what happens behind the scenes. How does the city prepare for these events before they happen? And what do we do in these emergency situations ahead of time?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Michael. And that's a great question from that resident. I'll go back a little bit. Emergency management as a whole and emergency preparedness at a city governmental level, I would say 95% of it is during these blue sky events when the storms are not happening. There's a lot of preparedness work as far as training and exercising, developments of plans and developments of hazard mitigation. So if we know that we are going to be impacted by something, what are the things we can do to lessen those impacts, whether that's through education of the public and outreach, or hard mitigation such as rebuilding of or strengthening of infrastructure. But when it comes down to storm events themselves, if we see something coming, we do have coordination checklists that we go through, and those triggers for action could be storm advisories. We participate in webinars and daily calls with the National Weather Service, whether it's about a high wind event or freezing rain or snow anticipated within Sammamish. Some other triggers for action could be below freezing temperatures sustained for multiple days or rainfall greater than 2 to 3 inches. When those trigger points are met, what we do is that kicks off a series of initial actions that specific response. We'll prepare for an incident briefing where we gather short and long-term weather forecasts. We identify the onset and type, severity, duration of what is to occur. We gather specific weather analysis and department-specific assessments on next to infrastructure such as our parks or roadways, any sort of planned events that the city or possibly city partners might be holding throughout the community prior to such event. And then we conduct initial briefings with staff to prep for planning meetings, arrange for whether it's remote teleconference type rooms for, transmitting information, coordinating between departments and external agencies. And then we send out initial notifications on who needs to attend. As we get closer to the storm or to the incident, we will get together with relevant department heads and agency reps to review the forecast, review lists of any upcoming or citywide events that this could impact. We look at the identified impacts of the storm itself, such as power, road closures, at-risk or vulnerable populations who may be affected. And then we conduct our emergency operations standard initial meeting where we review common objectives, such as we need to identify situational awareness of the event, develop and implement citywide strategies for our response and recovery. We promote a unity of effort within city departments and external agencies, and we begin on a public outreach strategy to reach our residents. We also then continue to identify expected actions or what is underway. COVID specifically, we look at our current staffing levels, any issues or concerns with staff or staff availability for an incident. We can place staff on standby or bring them in during after hours to work extended shifts or emergency shifts. We determine if there's any initial assistance or resource needs expected. Maybe we need to order more sand, more de-icer. In reality, though, I'd say almost all of those are done prior to the winter season. So during these blue sky events, our public works teams are already looking at all those, ordering parts, ordering all of the materials needed to last us through several storms. And then we talk about how we're going to coordinate this information to the public, whether it's key safety messages, preparedness messages, push that out through a variety of social media, city websites, emergency alerts. For example, this storm event, we pushed out a message through King County Alerts. So I definitely recommend all residents sign up for that. Then we communicate with city employees and how, and this again, this is all leading up to that storm event. During the event itself kicks off a whole other host of different response activities where you're providing regular situational updates. We're gathering what those impacts are, what roads are closed. We're coordinating with external agencies such as PSC, our school districts, our water service districts, and so forth to determine what their impacts are to see if we can help as needed.
Good, Andrew, that is really good background information to have. And as you said, we do encourage residents to sign up for those alerts. They can do so on our website at sammamish.us. At the very bottom of that, you'll see a link where you can sign up to receive email alerts and text messages, as well as Andrew's mentioned on the King County site alerts as well. Those are two important ones that we encourage all residents to sign up for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so kind of follow along just about the staffing. We had a resident ask, Dave and Jeff, this is a question that directed towards you too. Is the city short on staff due to the vaccine mandate, specifically in public works?
Well, let me start with that one. The city has not yet adopted a mandatory vaccination mandate. Some communities have. You see some messaging coming out from the state on emergency personnel and health and safety personnel. King County has made an effort in that regard for all public safety personnel in King County, and that affects King County Sheriff's Department as well as fire departments and the fire district. But we haven't adopted that program yet. So there isn't anything related to a mandatory vaccination effort that's affected our staffing in public works. Some of that staffing impacts have been done for other reasons, somewhat COVID related and or just a turnover in personnel. COVID has driven a lot of decisions by individuals to try to work closer to home and that sort of thing. If Jeff may have some additional comments on that regard.
Dave, I think you hit it spot on. Just to give kind of numbers and context to the Public Works division that we have down at the MOC, we have 12 positions budgeted in total. Due to turnover and whatnot, 4 positions are currently open, and 2 are new positions that the council adopted in the last budget cycle that we're beginning to fill as well. So it's not explicitly due to COVID, it's due to staffing turnover, retirements, lifestyle changes for some. And for some, it's a challenge to work, in Sammamish, given where they live. We have some people that commute as much as 40 minutes to, in one case, an hour and a half every day, one way. To serve the citizens of Sammamish. But I'll underscore it's not COVID specific. It's due to changes that we have on people's lifestyles and where they want to live and work.
Good. Thank you, both Dave and Jeff, for that. It's really helpful to know. Next, Dave, we have a question from a resident wanting to know about the reopening of City Hall. What is the plan to reopen City Hall coming out of COVID?
Well, we have a plan to reopen City Hall, and we have reviewed that with the council. We were looking at implementing that well over a month ago, but at the time we presented it, there was the Delta variant was starting to really show the impacts it was having regionally, nationally, and throughout the world. And those numbers have gone up dramatically for those who have been affected and those hospitalizations and related death rates. Now, recently, the numbers have started to come down, and that has gotten a lot of headlines, as well it should, but the numbers are still quite high. Hospitalizations and death rates, mostly for those folks who are unvaccinated. And we acknowledge we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the region, which is quite remarkable and says a lot about our residents. Yet we still have a lot of the population that is under 12 years old, that is back in school, and caution is very important here to see if there's going to be an uptick from that. But also now we're coming into the winter season where we have flu and we have people migrating and concentrating in enclosed spaces because of the weather and because of the holidays. So the numbers are still too high to make me comfortable, because we want to protect the public, but I also have a duty to protect our employees. So we concentrate very, very hard, as we have this last year and a half, to provide our services well and at a high service level remotely. So answering the question again and being a bit redundant, we have an opening plan, but we don't have a set date to implement that plan yet. We'll be revisiting this with the council in the coming weeks to see if they're still on track with that, or if the numbers have come down sufficiently to look at reopening perhaps in December and more likely in January.
Good. That's really good to know. And thank you for that answer. We definitely want to keep our community safe and healthy, especially through this holiday season here. And I do believe we have the reopening plan on our website, sammamish.us. It's under the City Hall page. And so residents can check that page for the complete plan as well. Okay, so Andrew, we have another emergency management question here. When going back to storm-related issues, because that's on the top of everyone's mind, as I hear the rain coming down outside right now too. When Sammamish and 228th are both shut down on both ends, how do residents evacuate?
Okay, so there's kind of two parts to that question. There's not too many. I would say during a winter storm, one of the best things you can do is probably hunker down. There really wouldn't be a need to evacuate or even be on the roads during these wind events or winter storm event. I think one of the most important things residents can do is stay off the roads, hunker down, and let our public works crews and emergency responders have access to these roads. Second part of that is when we do have access roads of ingress and egress blocked, whether it's through a down tree or down power lines, a landslide, a whole host of things that could damage these infrastructures. I think it's very important for residents to know the various ways on and off the plateau. And I understand those are limited, right? But being able to know how to get to your house or how to get to your children's school or your place of business in a varying route, and explore those routes during times of non-crisis. Can you take the Parkway? Can you take Duthie Hill Road to 202? Can you take 244th? So there's different options. For example, with this winter storm, 228th down by Pine Lake Middle was closed for an extended duration. And that was not because our public works crews could not get out there. They were out there immediately. It's because there were downed power lines, and we had to wait for PSE, who was deploying across the entire state, to be able to send a crew there first to assess the incident and then to eventually clear it. That allowed our staff enough time to establish detours, but that's not always going to be the case in a crisis. So knowing what those alternate routes are. In this example, that people could take the Parkway, they could go up towards the Highlands, and then circle around back into Sammamish. And now in a worst case scenario, under a large scale evacuation, which again, there are many different factors. We don't have exactly set evacuation routes because we don't have exactly set geographical hazards, like a tidal wave that would, you have to go one way to get away from the threat. One of the largest incidents that could cause evacuation around here might be a wildfire situation. So we don't know exactly where that fire might be starting, which direction it's going. So knowing how to get off the plateau from the north and to the south. And we do have various access gates, locked gates that go through some neighborhoods that in a crisis event could be open to give people alternative routes of exit or egress off the plateau. We are doing some additional studies right now. We just wrapped up an evacuation coordination plan, planning document, and we're pursuing grant funds right now to actually go deeper into the tactical weeds of evacuation, where we're now assessing traffic models, neighborhood models against our road infrastructure to really deem how long it might take to evacuate certain population centers within the city. I think that'll be very useful in the future.
Great, Andrew. Thank you so much. You're always a wealth of knowledge, and that's really good information to have. Jeff, I saw your hand up, and it's really good timing because I wanted to see if you want to piggyback on that because there is a question about what happened public works behind the scenes during these extreme weather situations as well.
Yeah, if you'll had the opportunity to look back on our website during this last event, rather quickly, once we knew that 228th was closed, we partnered obviously with Andrew and others to develop a site-specific detour route. We endeavor to not go through neighborhoods, but in the end, all streets are public, and during an emergency, we do the best we can to route where we can for the longest time. It was until I think midnight, 12:30, that PSE finally got back to that incident at 228th and got the power back up and the road restored. Our crews were on site to then, pull down the detours, in the wee hours of the morning and, restore the route. But going back to what Andrew had said, it is site specific and event specific. And we, either the engineers, the supervisors on the MOC, collaborate on best routes at the time. And it depends on the staffing resources that we have at hand. If it's very, very early in the process, it may be our maintenance supervisor and Andrew, quite frankly, the one picking the route. If it's later in the day or later in the event, our traffic people have come on board, or City Hall engineers are now on board, and we can spend some time and energy trying to make, figure the best routes, going forward. So I just wanted to echo that piece that Andrew had said. It's a collaboration, and it's, trying to find the best route for, site specific as it occurs. And then you got a second part of the question, I think.
It's just kind of what's happening with public works kind of behind the scenes when these weather events are happening.
Sure. Let me expand upon that just a little bit. As Andrew mentioned earlier, this collaboration is with Public Works as well. We're a stakeholder in the events. We actually started really the week before the event as Andrew was posting notices. There were various sources saying that there was going to be a weather bomb, kind of thing. And as that unfolded and got more and more information, then we, as Public Works, began to have more look-ahead meetings. And our maintenance crews, what they begin to do when the event is real, or at least more specific to likely to occur in our neighborhood, we begin to go back into our tools and equipment and tune them up. We'll make sure that the chainsaws are fully fueled. We'll test them. We'll make them work. We have an on-call person that's a daily on-call for the city of Sammamish. Somebody is on call at the time. All week long, every day, 365, somebody is on call. And that person actually comes in early when the event occurs and assesses what's happening. But prior to that, we also put people on call, on standby. And for this weekend, we put several people on standby to say, hey, given the triggers that Andrew was talking about, we're not sure it's going to be windy, but given the thresholds, be ready. And so we will put people, which we did. We had several people that were, put on the standby component. In the morning when the event started to occur, our on-call person was out on site and doing all that he could with what he was capable of doing by himself. And then he would call into the supervisor and go, hey, I need those guys in now. And then they would start assessing. And so now crews are beginning to show up and getting deployed where they need to. And pretty soon a street is, out of commission. And so now we're setting up detour routes, with what we have. And we also keep a couple people in reserve. We can't have everybody show up at, during that first period because we don't know how long it's going to go. So for us during this event, we had actually a total of 5 people active, for that 12-hour time period, if you will. And we had 2 in reserve waiting, to see if they needed to come in either overnight or the next day. Because we have to be sure our people, once they go home, they can come back, right? And they have to come back every day. And that's hugely important because they have families as well. Just as we are working to serve the families of Sammamish, our crews have families that, they need to go back and make sure things are working or set up so that they can come back the next day. So that's a kind of a little snippet that gives you some insight.
Yeah, I just want to say I love how dedicated the crews and the staff are here in Sammamish. It really is amazing work when they all come together in these situations. So, Andrew, you could talk a little bit about where people can find emergency management resources. I do believe we're actually putting the page up right now that is on sammamish.us. So, if you can just talk about the resources that they can find there a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the city website has a whole host of links and tools, city-specific preparedness guides, and additional resources for actually activating or mobilizing your neighborhoods to build neighborhood-specific plans. I'm going to combine this with another kind of question I know that people are interested in is what they need to do as far as once they know how to get the information, what do they need to do to prepare for these types of events themselves? So it's building those plans, understanding the threats, the hazards within the region. That comes with educating yourself with a lot of the resources found on the city's website. It can come in the way of CERT or community emergency response training on how to prepare yourself and your homes and your own families on disaster situations. But it also comes about building those kits, those emergency supplies. And one thing we constantly see in the city, and is no fault of anyone's at this moment, it's just you're going to have power outages. It's a high likelihood event given the types of hazards we face and just the geographic nature of the Sammamish Plateau. Being able to have a backup generator or being able to connect with neighbors who do, if you have resources, and be able to pool those together to help one another out. Having emergency lighting, having gas, and other types of stockpiles ready to go when the event happens. I think we all remember a few years ago during Snowmageddon when the grocery store shelves were bare because our supply chain gets disrupted. 18-wheel trucks cannot get up our roads when the roads are icy. So those, resupplies of grocery stores go bad. Or when we do lose power and the grocery stores themselves and their gas stations themselves have to close. So having those supplies on hand, knowing how to use them, will really mitigate most of the impacts you see in a community on an event like this. And then I think I'd go one step further is when you tie these events with climate change, you're going to see more frequent, greater magnitude weather events, whether it's in winter storms, flooding, and even during the summertime, which you don't think which impacts us now, is high heat and high drought events. We might have seen more trees and more limbs come down on this event because a lot of our trees, not just in public spaces, but in your homes, in your yards, were stressed from the high heats and high temperatures of the summer. So one thing that residents can do to be proactive in that regard is, work with an arborist or work with their landscapers to ensure that their trees are healthy, they're well maintained, their buildings are well maintained, their gutters are clear and things like that. So when the storm does happen, perhaps that stressed, big leaf maple in your yard doesn't come crashing down on top of your car. And I guess I'm going to give one final plug for homeowners insurance, renters insurance, and flood insurance. Probably some of the best disaster mitigation tools out there and available to our residents. I highly recommend getting those.
I'm going to do some plugs too, Andrew, for My Sammamish, right? Because we would love residents when they do see those downed trees, down power lines, broken street lights, to use the My Sammamish app to report those, because that's how, I believe, Jeff, that's how the crew is going to really respond quickly to those situations. It's really the best way of notifying the city of those issues. My other plug is for the new Adopt a Drain program that we just brought on. We really encourage residents to go to adoptadrain.org and find a drain in your neighborhood, on your street, and you can help clean out that drain to help prevent the flooding that happens this time of the year. Those are my two plugs, Andrea. So, Dave, if we can go back to you for a second. We really there's a lot of talk right now about the storm and just coming out of the storm this week. So there's a question from a resident that wants to know about the underground power lines. Has the city researched this? What's the cost? What is around underground power lines?
Power lines in many communities become an issue at such times like this because most communities have overhead power lines. If the community looks closely at the newer residential communities that are built, it's all underground. There's vaults underground. But this community started having people on it many, many years ago. And your primary core heavy voltage lines were established in the 60s and built up for the 70s, and then added to with some more transformers and such to accommodate the growing population. But they're all above ground, and they're not owned nor operated by the city of Sammamish, the city of Issaquah, the city of Redmond. PSE, Puget Sound Energy, owns and operates those lines. It is extremely expensive to underground major lines. I've lived in another community where we worked with Southern California Edison, and it took many years of saving money to underground, and then it would be maybe a mile or 2 miles of major high voltage lines to get it underground. So even if we try to take all of our overhead lines in this community, the one thing that we could avoid is, it's a lovely, heavily dense tree community. And people with trees are less likely to trim them. Keeping your trees properly trimmed with a certified arborist overseeing that or advising will keep many of the lines safer. So you'll see that trees along the major thoroughfares get trimmed. But in these heavy storm events where there's a lot of water saturating the soil and heavy winds causing blowdown of those trees and tree limbs, they bring down the power lines. And undergrounding those is very expensive. And we're one small community in a region that is heavily overhead supplied with power. The major lines coming into the community are all above ground. And as what happened in this last storm, the major power lines coming up to 28th from Issaquah, the major power pole came down, and we don't touch those. We let Puget Sound Energy come in, and with their hot sticks, they de-energize, they bring in a new pole, and they put it up. So there's very little we can do. And if the community wanted to save to start undergrounding, that is a major, major commitment to collect the dollars. And our current budget would nowhere near have any money to start doing that. We don't have any money dedicated to doing that. So I hope that provides some insight and background. Jeff is our public works professional. He might have a few other words and some experience to add to what I've already said. Jeff?
Yeah, a recent project, just to give context, Southeast 4th in the Town Center area was recently completed a year and a half ago. And in that project, the city partnered with not only PSE, but you have to keep in mind, PSE is the power provider. Your internet services are on the power pole as well. Your communications, other things are on the pole. If you look up on a pole, you can see sometimes 6 different levels of stuff on that pole. And so going back to the Southeast Fourth project, which was a major corridor project for the city, we partnered to create a joint utility trench where we each had our own, between gas and power and comms and those things in that corridor to keep it underground. And so our major thoroughfares, we are partnering with the franchise utilities to get them underground where we can. But as Dave said, an independent project to underground by itself, it's vastly expensive, and it's just a hard thing to do. But all new plots and so forth, as Dave indicated, we again undergrounding all the new neighborhoods, and we're transitioning the existing corridors as best as we can as those projects unfold.
Good. Great information to have, because there were a lot of questions after the storm about those underground power lines. Andrew, if I come to you, we're dealing with the rain event right now, but people also had a question during the heat waves as well. What is the criteria for opening City Hall during these extreme weather events?
Okay, so that's a great question. So there is no firm, hard or fast trigger points for the establishment of a cooling center, at least not here locally, and I'd say the majority of our neighboring cities as well. What gets us looking at that again is, those initial heat advisories, heat warnings. What does a specific incident look like? Or is it going to be multiple days, right? Is it going to be through the evening, where public centers or other places that individuals may go, such as a mall or a movie theater, are then closed? One big factor too is City Hall is not really established to be a mass care center. We have sheltering agreements in place between the city and the American Red Cross and several of the city-owned infrastructure and county-owned infrastructure, such as the public library, the YMCA, CWU, and several schools throughout the area. Our first go-to would be a center like the library or the YMCA, our community center. Those usually have extended hours of operation, even possibly beyond City Hall. They're set up to establish, they have community rooms dedicated to this, where they can easily set aside some water, allow people to come into their site, and so forth. The library might be much more thrilling, to tell you the truth, than sitting in the City Hall lobby. So there is different options in place. I wish I could give a better answer, but it definitely comes down to, one, looking at also vulnerable populations. Sammamish does not have a high population of homeless individuals, which may trigger a need for additional cooling centers. And also on the regional size of this event, if kind of segue this into the same with a windstorm, people may have been out of power. But the neighboring jurisdiction, Redmond to the north or Issaquah to the south, may have had power. So versus standing up an emergency shelter to have, people during a pandemic grouped together uncomfortably, these are not comfortable events when they do happen. If they needed to charge their phone, they could probably just drive 10 minutes to the north or 10 minutes to the south. But as far as cooling center is concerned, we did do that this summer, specifically because the library, King County Library, was still closed to the public due to COVID. The next next heat event that happened, the library was open, so we chose not to, because 100 feet away from City Hall, there was another public option. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, Andrew. And also, we will always communicate to residents where those options are. Because that's why we have these community partners. And so we will always communicate during these events, the options for residents during these times. That does help, Andrew. So now we're going to kind of take a look forward for Sammamish. We're going to talk a little bit about the Community Visioning Project. And I do believe we have Christina and Sarah online with us. Dave, if you want to just kind of open up by just telling us a little bit about the Community Visioning Project.
Sure, I'd be pleased to. The city's in the midst of an exciting project to review and update its community vision. Let's watch a short video here to introduce the Community Visioning Project. And then after the video, we'll have a short series of discussion questions led by staff.
Sammamish is working on an exciting project to imagine the city in 2044. This short video explains why this is important and how you can get involved to make your voice heard.
And participants, if you can hear me, the video is broadcasting, even though we cannot see or hear the video.
That shapes the Sammamish 2024 Comprehensive Plan, which in turn guides the future of the city. To get to a final vision statement, the project team will review the current vision statement,
You can't hear
which
me
was
though,
adopted
right?
in 2015.
Okay.
Conduct community outreach
broadcasting,
to understand
okay.
which different aspects or
But
characteristics
you have
of
to give me a
Sammamish
thumbs
are
up when the
most
video's
important to
done.
residents and other stakeholders, and perform the outreach based on diversity, equity, and inclusion to make sure we're listening to everyone. You might be wondering what the community vision is and how it's used. The vision is an aspirational description of what Sammamish will be in the future, in 2044 to be precise, and can be considered the guiding light or North Star for decision makers. The vision is grounded in community voices and reflects community values and priorities like sustainability, health, or quality of life, things we'll ask you to tell us about what's important. And the vision, once it's adopted, is used as a basis for identifying goals and policies in the comprehensive plan and other city plans and decisions to move the city closer to the community's desired future. The city also has some responsibilities to plan in a regional context. In Washington, we use a nested hierarchy for community planning with local plans at the center, closest to on-the-ground changes. Planning begins with the Growth Management Act, or GMA. The GMA sets big picture expectations about the content and framework for comprehensive plans. Then the Puget Sound Regional Council, a multi-county planning body, establishes regional priorities and guidance for multi-county planning issues like traffic or housing choice and affordability. To further address these types of issues, King County sets countywide planning policies. Finally, the local comprehensive plan describes how each jurisdiction will be consistent with all of this guidance. At the heart of it all is the community vision. So what do we need from you? We need you to tell us about your community and everything you value about living, working, or playing in Sammamish. Your input will make sure the best parts of Sammamish as it is today are reflected in the statement. Help us understand what the community, the entire community, wants for its future in 2044. And let us align the vision statement with the community's values, priorities, and interests. The vision can then be used to move Sammamish closer to its 2044 ideal by informing goals and policies. Once the vision is adopted, it becomes the lens through which goals and policies are viewed and decisions are made. This leads to big and small implementation actions over the course of many years, which in turn leads to achieving the vision. This project has a quick timeline, with most of our activities happening this fall and early winter, and the whole project wrapping up in March. Community engagement begins in mid-September. Then, look for a survey in October or November. If you receive a paper survey in the mail, please fill it out and send it in. Otherwise, look for a link to fill out the survey online. The city will advertise the link as soon as it's available. We'll also be hosting or attending events throughout the fall, like the October Town Hall meeting, where you can talk with us about what's important to you. The Planning Commission and City Council will hold meetings in early October, early February, and mid-March to review findings, recommendations, and the final product. Find all the project information as it's available, including the survey link, event schedule, and our findings and reports as they're developed, online at connect.sammamish.us/community-visioning.
Okay, that
You
was a
ever
great
wondered
video
what
about our
actors and
community
actresses
visioning
do when they have to
project.
get in shape really fast for a
Next, we
movie?
have
Because I can promise you, it's
Sarah,
not the same diet that you're
Christina,
following
and
and the
Miriam
same
on the
training plan
call
that you
to
try.
go over some
Why? Because
discussion
what they
questions
do is
that you
take a
you'll
catered
see on the screen as
approach.
well.
You want to know why running on the
I'll turn it
treadmill
over to
7 days a
you.
week doesn't work for you when you're trying to lose weight? Because it never has. And I know that's hard to believe, but it's true. Cardio actually burns calories, usually in the form of carbs in the bloodstream that are then replaced.
Christina, do you want to go with the discussion questions?
Sure. Are they being shared already?
Yes. Mhm.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. So I hope that we've got a few folks still participating on Facebook Live. We have some questions that we'd like to go over with our community. This is one part of our public outreach. And the first thing that we'd like to hear from our community is please reflect on what you've seen happening in Sammamish from a development perspective or from a community building perspective.
All right, thanks, Christina. We're checking Facebook Live right now to see if we have any participants right now in commenting. Okay. We did not have anyone pop into commenting on Facebook Live. Did you want to just move on from there?
Yeah. So the next question that we'll offer for people to respond to is, what are the best parts of our community, the city of Sammamish?
You know, if we don't have any participants on Facebook Live right now and commenting, what we can do is we can put these questions in the chat there so residents can respond to those questions, and then we can forward those responses on as well. It'd be nice for residents to be able to see what other residents are saying about the Community Visioning Project and what they like about the community and what's happening around the community and some of their favorite parts of Sammamish. We can gather that information in the chat, and then we can definitely share that with the residents.
That's a great idea. And we're really hoping to have this be more like a community conversation. And so I think that would be great, really.
Mm-hmm. And do we have anyone participating in the chat right now on community visioning? Okay, so we're posting those questions there, and we will definitely follow up with those responses as well. And we hope that as many residents as possible kind of participate in the survey that I know is going out right now. I received it in my mailbox.
Oh, good.
I know. I just got it yesterday, so I was very excited to see it in my mailbox. And as the survey is starting to roll out to residents, we really want to encourage residents to provide that feedback. This is opportunity to set what you would like your community to look like in the future. I mean, this is a great opportunity.
Yes, it's so important. This is really what's going to set the tone for development in the city for the next 20 years. So this is your chance to start making your voice heard at the very beginning of this process. I'd also say that if this is a project you're interested in following, either through the community visioning project itself or as it leads into the broader comprehensive plan update process, I'll refer you to the website that is on the last slide, connect.sammamish.us/community-visioning. This is a place where you'll find all kinds of project updates. You'll find the dates of key events, our draft and final documents as those are available. So check the website often, and I definitely look forward to hearing from everyone.
Yeah, that's really great because I know we do receive quite a few questions across social media about the city's vision, and also are we getting information from our residents? Are we collecting what our residents want to see for their community going forward? And so this is why we really want to promote this and encourage residents to check out the community visioning page and connect, because this is the opportunity. This is the time.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. There's also a comment form on the website. So if you have anything that you'd like to share, any thoughts separately from the survey, please log in and let us know what you're thinking.
Right, and we have that website link showing on the screen right now. So we encourage all residents to really go check out the community visioning page. Like we said, this is the time to be heard.
Yes.
Any final thoughts on the community visioning for now?
I would turn it over to Sarah or Miriam if they had any closing comments.
No, I would just echo what's already been said. We're really trying to reach as many residents as possible, hear from as many people as possible. And then we'll be looking at common themes and looking at our current vision statement and seeing what needs to be changed based on the feedback that we're receiving from the community members. So it's really important to do the survey, to participate in some of our other events, and make sure that your opinion is heard.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing the community visioning with us during the town hall. It's really an important part of our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we do have some final questions here that were directed towards police. Unfortunately, Chief Pingrey was not able to be here because he is under the weather. So we do have some responses, Dave, that you're going to help us answer these questions from residents. The first one is, you talked about this before about city staff and public works, but this question is about police specifically. Has there been any police that have resigned due to the vaccine mandate?
Well, as we know, the governor set down and established mandatory vaccination policies, and King County has reiterated that to certain areas of its government, including King County Sheriff's Department. As to Sammamish specifically, we've had one resignation so far. I don't know whether we anticipate more or not, but just as background, the King County Sheriff's Department had a deadline of October 18th, but I belong to a group of the contract city managers that contract with the King County Sheriff, and we had an interactive meeting with a lot of the CEO, the executive staff, and the King County Sheriff last week. The King County Sheriff was asked the question, how many officers are resigned or do you anticipate resigning? And the sheriff said she declined to comment at the time because they have an ongoing interactive discussions going on with religious and or other medical exemptions for officers. So while that's going on, they're determining whether or not there's accommodations that can be allowed. So this direct answer to the question, we've had one officer that's assigned to our police department, and we contract with the King County Sheriff Department. He has resigned.
Okay, thank you, Dave, for providing that information. So the next question is really about crime in Sammamish. Is it true that crime is increasing in Sammamish? Is Sammamish affected by the rise of crime in King County?
Crime is not increasing in Sammamish. We have specific detectives that are certainly assigned to crime incidents that occur, and there are certain types of events that create an increase in crime in the streets and in our neighborhoods that are by particular people who may go from one community to the other and have frequented Sammamish. Those are usually isolated, and a crime task force is usually on those folks trying to trace them down and or follow up on those crimes. So in general, no, crime is not increasing.
Mm-hmm. Good to know. I mean, that is a question that we're seeing pop up a lot on social media. So it's good to have the direct answer for that. Following that line, there was a police service study done in 2018, and there was a question about the outcome of that study. What was the outcome, and is Sammamish Police Department receiving the support that it needs to effectively police?
Okay, yes, there was a police report completed. It was one of the major reports that I read when I came to the city in early 2020. And it had a recommendation for additional officers. We looked at that in 2020, and in late 2020 for this 2021-22 budget, I had, along with the chief, made a recommendation for 4 additional positions to be added to our complement of officers. One, a sergeant supervisor, a couple of patrol officers, and working with the school districts, an additional school resource officer, from which our children in our schools benefit directly. We've got a great relationship with our school districts and the students with our SROs who undergo special training. So we have embarked upon trying to do that, but we also have to work with the entire King County Sheriff's Office, who has a multitude of requests and are undergoing their own turnover. Retirees increasing, retirements increasing, and officers leaving to go to other communities, other states. And so that has made the process a bit slower to get those positions filled. But the council has approved and budgeted for 4 additional officers that we are in the process of trying to get on board.
It's really good to know. We do see a lot of conversations out in the community about this police service study and just staffing levels of police. And so it's really good to have the right information out there. And also, I know Chief Pingrey is very accessible, and he's always willing to have a conversation about these things as well. So if the public is ever interested in knowing these numbers or anything, they can always reach out to him as well. His contact information is actually on the website.
Yes, he would be very pleased to answer additional questions and regrets not being here. And one of the other things I wanted to mention is that here at City Hall, we not only have our contingent for the Sammamish Police Department, but we also house a number of officers, a 2nd precinct for King County Sheriff's Office. So we have additional resources that work out of our City Hall. And those additional resources are always available to help supplement our staff when the chief calls for additional assistance. And if there are major crimes that occur in our region or events that need additional officers, that contingency is a ready resource for us. And so we welcome the partnership that we have and embrace it with the King County Sheriff and the housing of that precinct here at our City Hall.
Great, and that's really helpful to know. And I know the chief definitely regrets not being here today because he is always willing to answer a question. I did tell him that we might talk about him though if he wasn't here. So that was all the questions that we had from residents. We do want to talk a little bit about our communication channels because we do these quarterly town hall meetings, and we want residents to know how they can reach the city, get information about the city, and stay in touch with the city. And so we are actually showing on the screen right now all of our communication channels for the city. We have our main website, where residents can find community news and events, department pages, and contact information. That's at sammamish.us. But then we also have our engagement website that connects Sammamish. That's where residents can go to be engaged with the city and to connect with the city. That's where you can find projects, pages on current projects, like the community visioning that we just talked about. That one's on Connect Sammamish. We have our diversity, equity, and inclusion page there, weather events page and updates. Our Cone Zone is about traffic around Sammamish. And we also have our COVID updates page there. I know Andrew's constantly through the last year and a half or since COVID has been updating that page as well. We also just launched a new page there called Ask Sammamish, where residents can ask questions instead of making a phone call. It's easier to just ask a question online. We monitor that page for any questions coming in from residents. We encourage residents to go to Connect Sammamish because that is our engagement site. Next, we have our e-news that comes out every Friday to your inbox. We encourage residents to sign up to receive e-news. You can do that also on the website, sammamish.us. You can sign up to receive e-news. E-news has community bulletins, a calendar of events, and news of the week. That's really a summary of everything Sammamish that you would get in your inbox every Friday. Next, we have the print newsletter that comes out every month. That covers all the news of Sammamish for that month, important topics, and also events and holidays information as well. That's a really great newsletter that just comes out to all residents in their mailboxes every month. You don't have to sign up for that one. In addition to that, we have special bulletins that we send out to residents. So the same way that you sign up for e-news, you can also sign up to receive bulletins on topics that you can customize yourself. You can choose to receive public notices, bulletins on transportation, bulletins on stormwater, and many other bulletins are in that list. So we encourage you to go there and see what you do want to hear from your city and sign up for those bulletins. Next, we have our social media channels. We always aim to provide a welcoming community with civil discourse across our social media channels. We encourage all residents to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Nextdoor. We always we publish there daily information that will help residents and good resources and events happening with the city. And then we have our civic web portal. If you want to stay informed on city government, the civic web portal is the place to go. You'll see us schedule meetings, get meeting agendas and supported documents, and view past meetings. And that's all at sammamishwall.civicweb. That is all that I have for the communication channels. We do encourage residents to reach out to us if they have any questions about how to stay in touch with the city or how to get news from the city. Dave, do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
Thank you for asking me. Yes, I just wanted to make mention that all of those services, all of that communication effort, there is a lot there that we provide to the community. And it just doesn't happen by itself. There is a whole group of people working here that provide information and documentation. But for our comms team, you yourself, Michaeline, and Celia, do a phenomenal job. And it takes a big effort by both of you to get those things updated daily, e-news out weekly, our monthly newsletter, and to gather information, solidify it, and get it out to the community. So thank you to the both of you for this event today, for the staff who participated, and all those behind the scenes that made this event possible.
Thank you, Dave. We really do have a great community here. Thank you. Andrew, did you have any final thoughts as well? All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Jeff Ellicus. And thank you to Community Visioning Project as well. And thank you to the residents who have joined us online. We will also post this so that it will be on our YouTube channel and Facebook page to view later as well. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you.